The morning sun broke free of the mist, spilling gold across a forest floor still slick with dew. I had not intended to find anything remarkable that day, only to wander, to breathe in the crisp mountain air, to reconnect with the quiet cathedral of the pines. But fate has a curious way of leaving signs for those who look down as much as they look up. It was there, just past a glen where the blackberries grow wild, that I saw them, imprints so large they seemed almost a sculptor's work, pressed deep into the soft earth as though by something heavy yet deliberate and graceful. At first I thought they might be bear prints, but there was a difference, long, broad, and with a stride that felt almost human. Kneeling beside the first track, I ran a hand along the dry ridge of its edge. The span was enormous, yet there was something else that kept me frozen in place. A smaller set of prints trailing alongside, their steps shorter, uncertain, as if belonging to a younger companion. A mother and a child. The realization made my chest tighten, not from fear, but from an odd and aching tenderness. In all my life of hiking and exploring, I had heard countless rumors about Bigfoot campfire tales told in whispers, grainy photographs pinned to corkboards, testimonies that waver between conviction and doubt. Yet standing there, I felt something shift. The stories were no longer just stories. Something had walked here, and it had not walked alone. The tracks led northward, winding into the deeper wilderness. Against my better judgment, against every practical instinct, I felt an irresistible pull to follow. I told myself it was curiosity, but in truth it was more than that. There was a quiet urgency humming in those footprints, as though they were not just marks in the earth, but an invitation. The forest thickened the farther I went, filtering sunlight into soft, fractured beams. Birdsong accompanied my steps, joined by the rustle of unseen creatures in the underbrush. Occasionally, the tracks would fade into dry leaf litter, and I would have to stop, scan the ground, and circle until they revealed themselves again. The larger prints had a confidence to them, a steady pace. The smaller followed closely, but sometimes staggered small detours toward a log, a bush heavy with berries, or a pool where the mud was churned in playful chaos. Hours passed in this way. At one point I crossed through a sector of the forest where the pines gave way to towering cedars, their trunks wide enough to shelter an entire family in the curve of their roots. Here, the prints paused, circling an ancient tree. The earth was pressed down as if they had rested there for a while. I imagined the mother leaning against the trunk, her great shoulders easing, perhaps feeding her child or simply watching the canopy sway. That mental image, silent, tender, unguarded, made me gasp. How easily we forget that what we seek to prove often has its own quiet life, far from our definitions or debate. Not long after, the tracks veered toward a stream. I followed the sound of rushing water until it appeared before me, tumbling over stones polished smooth by centuries. On the opposite bank, the prints reappeared in the mud, a larger foot's deep mark beside the lighter, erratic stamp of the smaller one. Here, I felt I was closing in, not in the sense of a hunter approaching prey, but as a guest nearing the edge of someone's home. The air grew cooler as afternoon tilted toward evening. My excitement was tempered by an awareness that I was far deeper into the wilderness than I had planned, and still I pressed forward. There was no fear within me, only the strange conviction that whatever lay ahead was worth the journey. Then, in a clearing, I saw it. A slight movement in the shadows between two massive firs. I froze. It was too far to discern detail. Only a suggestion of form, tall, broad, swaying gently as though shifting weight from one foot to another. Beside it, something smaller, moving in uneven bursts, darting close and then pulling back again. I couldn't see faces, only silhouettes, and yet I knew, the mother and her child, they did not run. They did not charge. Instead, they stood for a heartbeat, two lives woven into the fabric of the forest, before slipping soundlessly into the undergrowth. It was as if the trees themselves had closed behind them. I stared at the empty space, my pulse roaring in my ears. I could have rushed after them, announced myself, tried to capture proof. For a moment I nearly did. But something stopped me, something that felt like respect, or perhaps gratitude. That brief, unguarded moment was a gift. To demand more would have been greed. I lingered until the fading light began to paint the world in silver and shadow. Retracing my steps, I followed their prints backward, watching them grow fresher in my mind, until at last they faded into the mundane scuff marks of my own boots. When I finally emerged from the forest's edge, night had almost fully taken the sky. Above me, stars crowded together in quiet brilliance. I thought of the mother and the child beneath that same sky, moving through the dark with ease, as invisible to the world as the wind's own breath. In the days since, I have told no one exactly where I went or what I saw. They would ask for evidence, for photographs, for something to measure and record. But there are truths that live beyond documentation, beyond the reach of scrutiny. Some truths bloom only in the heart of the one who has walked far enough, quietly enough, to find them. I do not know if our paths will cross again. I do not even know if what I saw was meant for me, or if I was merely a shadow passing through theirs. What I do know is that the forest feels different to me now. It is richer, more alive, threaded through with a presence I can sense if I stand still and listen. And on certain mornings, when the mist clings low to the ground and the sun lifts over the ridges, I find myself looking quietly for the shape of a footprint large and sure, or small and uncertain pressed into the soft earth, carrying with it the silent promise of mystery. Because somewhere in the vast green labyrinth, a Bigfoot mother and her child are still walking, leaving behind the lightest of signs for those willing to follow, not to capture, but to understand.